thing.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Yes. So, hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. We're going to be doing an intro to live coding with Estuary today, using a few different languages, and then we'll do a few tutorials, and then at the end we'll hopefully have a great collaboration in this live coding environment we're going to use. So let's kick it off. The first thing I'm going to do is share a link with you where you can download the worksheets for today and the slides. So let me know if that works, so that you can have them as you go. Yeah, okay, great then. And then we can. I'm going to start off with the slides. So there we go. And it minimizes everybody. Yeah, it's okay. All right then. So, okay, so yeah, intro to live coding. What we're going to do, some introductions, overview of live coding as a performance art, getting started with Estuary, and then a mini title tutorial, a punctual audio tutorial, and a punctual video tutorial. Hopefully we can get through all this in the time that we have. And finally, a jam session at the end. Who am I? I'm based in Hamilton. Like I said before, I've been live coding and experimenting with this for about 4 years now, since I moved here and discovered this Cybernetic Orchestra based out of McMaster University. And what that is a group of floating around 10 people, where we, before the pandemic, we would get together in person in one of the rooms at McMaster that's set up really well with lots of speakers and display walls, and we would have these jam sessions where we're all on our laptops connected to this web application and collaborating there. Since the pandemic, we've moved to just doing this. We didn't even skip a beat. Right away, we were just able to continue collaborating from home, and we even recorded an album and put that out. Just released it recently, actually. And so it's been really great to be involved with this group, with that group, and kind of continue on and keep active with this through that, and some other things as well. And then otherwise, during the day I work as a software developer in the media and entertainment industry. So then what do we mean by live coding? Today, what we're talking about is when you're writing code on the fly to create either sound or images based on digital media in a performance setting. And so there are many different environments that work on every different operating system, but a lot of the time the common setup is to, if you're performing, you're up on stage, you're on your laptop, and there's your code, and the visuals are being projected onto a screen, usually behind you or on different walls in the room. So just for a few of the languages that you can use for such a thing, there are some links here that you can check out if you'd like, as well as the Wikipedia page on live coding for a little more, few more details there. And so, first of all, as one example of a live coding language, this is quite a popular one called Tidal Cycles. What we're going to be using today in the Estuary web application is called Mini Tidal, which is sort of a subset of Tidal Cycles. The developers of Estuary, when there's a change to Tidal Cycles, they have to go and update their code in Estuary and add these new features. So it's always lagging a bit behind Tidal Cycles, but they're very similar. And I'll show you later that you can easily use the reference in the documentation of Tidal Cycles to within Estuary with just a small change. But I'm going to show just a few videos here to give you a few examples of some ways you can do this. So this first video is just someone kind of practicing at home. This is a screen share. This is what you'll see a lot of the time if you've downloaded and installed Tidal Cycles on your own computer. So this is running locally without a browser now. can you hear that okay? I might have missed. Yeah, it's okay. So you can see it's how quickly things get interesting with not too much code. When you get to understand the syntax, it makes a lot of sense, even though it could look pretty weird right now. And so you can see like similarly to Estuary, you can separate these blocks, these paragraphs into different lines. And so that just helps you when you're live coding to keep things organized. You can comment out certain lines and change and then add them back later on, and it's really useful to use like that. Just applying an effect to your low pass filter with some parameters. And then you keep adding to it. And so there you go. That's I think these videos are really great for learning, and you can always open that up and try and do the same thing on your own computer or take that and modify it and play with it. So that's a great way to learn. But then in more of a performance setting, we have something that looks like this. This is where the projectors are set up, and you're seeing there are just a couple of screens that are showing the audience the code and the visual. So it's always a part of the fun to you can either focus as much on the code if you want, or just listen to the music. Like it's totally up to the viewer on how much they want to think about it or feel the music and enjoy the experience. And for another example, okay. For another example here. So anyway, those are just a few examples of when people start out live coding, maybe they've seen like these things called algorithms is sort of what was created that led to performances like that, where like it's quite like a party. It's upbeat. It's loud. People are dancing, and that's like there are a lot of fun in that sense, and a lot of people aspire to get to that point. So there are a few different directions, I guess, you can go with it, and something for like I've never even played one, but that would be a lot of fun to try at some point. But before getting to that stage, you have to start somewhere, and especially with live coding, like everything, there are some challenges for beginners. And so a few of these would include like all of the options that you saw some of them listed before, but a lot of people find it's hard to decide where to begin. And then as well, as some people may have seen when they looked up Tidal Cycles, the installation process, it just does not look fun, is not fun, can always be complicated. Oftentimes there are problems, and The same goes for many of these languages, just because they're so customized, and along with that, there are these steep learning curves with such different, languages where you're looking at syntax and you have to really like understand some of the details, and people who maybe are not so comfortable with code, it's especially a challenge. And then again, with that, these small communities, there's limited documentation and help available. So when you have a problem, like you have to really, dig through some reading material or join a Discord server and hope that someone on there can help you. It's not as easy as looking things up on Stack Overflow or for those that code. And so that's where Estuary sort of comes from. And this is an application developed by a guy named Dr. David Ogborn at McMaster, who's actually my master's supervisor and research assistant supervisor. So when I was there, I helped develop some of Estuary along the way. So this is a web application where people can connect and collaborate online and use different languages all in the same environment. So I'm excited to show this to you all today. And yeah, like I was explaining, it's a collaborative live coding platform. You can also just go on there and play by yourself. There's a solo mode. There are tutorials with a number of languages to try, and no installation required besides a modern web browser. Chrome, and for everybody, if you haven't heard, Chrome is absolutely recommended for using this. No guarantees really on with anything else. And just for a couple of examples of what can be done with Estuary, here's something that I did a while back, just like using a few different boxes with a couple different languages and sounds for a solo performance. So nice part there is that when you're playing on your own, you can take up as many boxes as you like and really keep things organized, and you can keep these sounds far apart, right? Like sample bitrate does it stream at. I think I underdid the frame rate of this recording here, so that's why it looks a bit glitchy. When we use it in person, you'll see there are some settings you can change some performance settings. But yeah, that was a problem with my screen recording, if you're wondering about that. And for what we're going to aim for today, anyway, for the final example here, is this is a group collaboration with something like 8 people working together in Estuary. So you can see that there's a lot going on there, and it's probably hard to understand it all at this point. But when you're there in it, you're it's just like collaborating with any instruments, right? You're focusing. You have your own box in front of you. You're kind of zoomed in on that, and you don't have to really understand or you can glance at look at what other people are doing, but it's a lot about just focusing on your own code and hearing what's going on and responding to that. So a lot of those elements of collaborating with music are still very present, and especially with bigger groups, you have to it's nice because you're limited to like a smaller space, right? So you don't have to make these big complicated lines to effectively collaborate. So that's great, I think, and a really important thing to remember as we move forward. And with that, I think we can get going in Estuary now. So over to Chrome, and we go to estuary.mcmaster.ca. And then here we are. Just a few things to note in this interface. There are a few themes to choose from. We're just going to keep it on classic for now. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. There's a link in the chat if you want to use that. And supports just a few languages right now. We're always looking for collaborators to help with language support. And there's some reference material and settings over on the right if you hit this question mark. When we're collaborating, you can open up these language references and see examples of, say, mini title. And these are some different effects and control patterns that you can add to your code. And these are examples listed here. If you click on the name of the function, you'll see an explanation of what it's doing. So that's really handy to even have open when you're working, and you can copy and paste things from here into your box and try them out. And same thing with Punctual that we'll be using today, but don't rely on this so much because it's out of date. I can tell you that, and that a lot of these won't work. So don't go there for Punctual reference. I'll show you where you can actually go for more reliable Punctual documentation. And then these are a couple other languages available on this platform called Hydra, and which some of you may have heard of before, and Sinacero, which was developed by one of the developers of Estuary. And similarly, we have terminal view commands. The terminal is down here. It's also the chat window when we're collaborating. I'm not going to get into any terminal commands right now, but we can do that later if there's time. And then otherwise, there are some settings here that have paragraphs to explain what they do. We don't need to touch these right now, but I just wanted to show you that those are there. And we have these are the tutorials here. They're fairly basic, but they at least get you started using, say, mini title in Estuary, which is to have that specificity is nice rather than grabbing examples from the Tidal Cycles documentation. But I'm going to jump into solo mode right now. If you're following along, you can all do the same. And we'll each be in our own environment, not collaborating yet. We'll do that later. But we can get started on going through the worksheets now. And I'm going to open those up. Yeah, and then there's the link to the worksheets and the slides that Kyle just dropped in the chat. If anybody joined late. And so, first of all, like I say, we were collaborating. I would put my name up here, and other people can add their names to other boxes. For now, we'll just do it like that, and then you choose your language. I'm going to start with mini title for now, and away we go. So mini title, Tidal Cycles. Let me show you this first. Tidal Cycles is really focused on these cycles, and you'll see that where the name comes from very quickly, because everything you put inside of the quotes will share a space, I guess. And if you have only one item listed, it'll play once per cycle. But the more items you add to a cycle, it'll evenly distribute the time amongst the list you have. And so that makes it really good for adding things to and not worrying about having to really write out exactly like how much time each item gets in this list. So this is the Tidal Cycles reference. I left a link to it at the end of the slide. So absolutely, it's well written and very helpful to go through this. And see in the examples here, I'll just note that they have this D1 and $sign list before these S. S just means, it stands for a sound, so these are samples. When you say you're grabbing an example from the Tidal Cycles documentation, you just need to copy and paste from the S, and then you can drop that into Estuary, because essentially each box is another channel. So you don't have to say what audio channel you're using. Like this, the D1 in Tidal Cycles just means channel 1, and you can go up to, I think there are 16 channels to use there. So you can ignore that anytime you're moving from a Tidal Cycles example to Estuary. And so with this pattern here, where we see that there's a bass drum, a hi-hat, a bass drum, and a hi-hat, and we're going to hear those 4 samples played evenly distributed across this one cycle. You hear that okay? Yeah. Right, so that's going to divide the cycle up into 4. If I got rid of 2 of those, it would just play 2 samples for twice as long each, right? To fill up that whole cycle. So then if you wanted to just play the same sample twice, there's a shorthand for that, the exclamation mark, which will just play another bass drum sample here. So that's 2 samples per cycle. And then if I wanted to play hi-hats on the other half, I could do something like that. Right, so you'll see that a lot of times there are shorter ways to write things, and it's important, especially in a performance setting, to make things as concise as you can, because you want to make changes and keep things interesting as you go. So it's great to learn these shortcuts soon and help you just keep things flexible, I guess, on the fly. And yeah, you can kind of go nuts with it. Like if you wanted to load up a whole bunch of samples in a bar, like it'll still fit them all into the single cycle, right? So it's just going to play a lot of things fast here. And you can keep going with that to infinity and really break things, and you try and play something 1,000 times, but it's not going to sound good, and it's going to really drag down the performance of your system as well, right? Like to trigger that many samples in a row is really hard on the computer. And with Estuary, there's a lot of reliance on your own system, so it's not like it's much more on the client end in terms of performance than on the server side. If you want to use a rest, if you want to include a rest in a cycle, you could have something. It's a tilde, right? So that'll put a rest in the 3rd beat of the bar, essentially. Add another rest. And to continue on with how to divide up these cycles, if you want to, if you had this, it's just going to play the samples in like a 3/4 time signature. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So say you wanted to actually just have the bass drum and the snare in the first half of the bar, and only the hi-hats in the second half of the bar. You would use square brackets for that. Right? And if you wanted to play, say you wanted the hi-hats and some other pattern to play at the same time and to start on the one, you could add then you could add a comma and then another set of samples, and then we'll hear like a syncopated beat here because the hi-hats are playing in 3 and you're hearing a bass drum and a snare on 1 and 3. Right, so it's overlaying both of those sample lists and splitting them between, splitting them up amongst the cycle. Similarly, if you wanted to go back to this 3/4 example, you might want to have two bass drums in the first bar of this, in the first beat of this bar. So you could write this and have those bass drums share that first beat, and that would be fine. But here's another shortcut, like with the exclamation mark before, is if you just want to have 2 bass drum hits on that first beat, you can multiply a sample by a number, and that'll play 2 bass drums on that first beat. So there's no difference in what we're hearing now compared to what we were just hearing. And then in the reverse, you can also slow down a sample by dividing, and so you'll only hear the bass drum every other cycle now. Right, there's I skipped it there, space. So it'll play the bass drum every 2 cycles, and when it's not there, there'll be a rest instead of skipping it and just having a snare and a hi-hat. So oftentimes if we're using a notation like that, it won't change the rhythm of the cycle. It'll just add a rest, so it keeps everything on the sounding in that same sort of time arrangement. Yeah, I can make my screen a bit bigger. Sorry. How's that? And so you can also create some random choices in the sample selection. So again, using the square brackets, but if I do bass drum and then this vertical line, and then a clap and a hi-hat, then each cycle it's going to pick randomly from this list. So it's unpredictable what you're going to get each time, which is fun. Okay, if you want to alternate between patterns, that's going to play right. It's going to play a bass drum 3 times there, and then a snare drum on the 4th beat. That exclamation mark 3 just means it's the same as 3 exclamation marks like that. So another shortcut there. You can also randomly remove events from a pattern. So maybe you don't want to always have a sample included in the cycle. If you had a question mark, then sometimes it may not be there and it'll be replaced with a rest once again. Okay, and so I was calling the names of these samples, but in fact, they're actually sample folders. When you see like BD or SN, like so you can select different sounds from each of the folders by using this notation. So just to hear the regular bass drum. And if we do a :1, then it's going to select the second sample in the folder. Not very different. Let's try snare. Maybe these ones are a bit more different. So basic snare. Snare 1. There, that's a clear difference. You hear that a bit better. And yeah, so depending on the sample folder, the sample group, there may be different number of alternatives, so which affects you as if you're coding and using doing certain things to algorithmically select different specific samples. You have to, I guess, kind of experiment. And there's also a GitHub repository where you can see the list of samples and look at exactly like how many are in each folder. And so it takes some exploration, I guess, to know if it's important how many specifically are in each sample category. So that's all of this in terms of tidal cycles is what's been called mini notation, and that's about how to pattern these different sample sounds and how to algorithmically select different ones. And so it's kind of like a fundamental part of tidal cycles is how to use those different brackets and the different repeating patterns to sort of get you going with just these lists of samples. But now we're going to move on to something to sort of you can add on top of your list of samples and this mini notation, and you start to look at some effects as well as oscillators and how they're used in mini tidal and tidal cycles. So we have a bass drum. We're going to keep going with the bass drum because it's nice and boring and easy to hear and understand the changes. We're going to repeat it 8 times, but we're going to apply an effect. So you apply an effect with a hashtag number sign, and you give the name of the effect, and then a lot of the time they'll take parameters. And so pan goes from 0 to 1, and 0's on the left, and 1's on the right. But say I want to move that sound around our headphones, we can use a sine wave, which is going to go from 0 to 1 once each cycle by default. 0 to 1 and back to 0. Right, so that's how you can start to get some movement in your samples rather than having everything straight up the middle. And for a lot of the effects that you use, you can apply these oscillators and have these things changing, whether it's a filter or a pan or gain, and that's how you create this, how you extend these patterns and have them repeat at a slower rate, I guess, and have a long time before you hear like the beginning of the pattern again. And if I haven't mentioned, I'm pressing Shift Enter to execute my code, and if you can comment out your code with a couple of dashes and a space, and then also you can just hit this execute button there instead of Shift Enter. And any other questions at this point before moving forward?
I have a couple of questions, but they seem like maybe kind of more advanced things. Are you going to get into like what do you call it? Euclidean rhythms?
We could if we have time. I didn't have it in the worksheet, but it's in the reference as well. If you want to add that in at a collaboration. But absolutely, yeah. If we have time, we're going through this pretty quickly, so I can at least show you that.
Okay. The other question I had was, what was it? Oh, is there a way to call the length of the list of samples in a folder?
Not within Estuary.
Okay.
Like really, it kind of takes some experimenting, I guess. Like you could,
Sure.
one way you can do it is if you, I'm not going to go there actually just yet.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Not an Estuary. You can do, yeah, I can show you some GitHub repositories after where then you can look at, if you're curious about a certain sample. And a lot of these are just the basic tidal cycles samples, like the super dirt samples is what they're called. We can even go there now if you want. And is it? Not this one. I might have to dig that up for you.
No problem.
But yeah, so that, well, we'll figure that out. But keep moving for now. So, okay, any other questions at this point? All right, then we'll move on and keep going with oscillators for a few minutes. So there are a few different oscillators. For those that are familiar, like all the basic ones are there. We heard the sine, you can hear the saw. All right, it's just gonna go back and forth. Or there's triangle. And here I'm just checking the reference. Yeah, sine, cosine, square, saw. So, and what they're doing is, by default, they're just playing once per cycle, right, through the oscillator. But say you wanted to slow it down, so it takes 2 cycles to kind of get to the beginning of the waveform again. Then you can do this. You can add a slow 2 and a $sign in front of sine. And so that just slows this sine wave down and says repeat every 2 cycles. So you hear now that that's moving half the speed as it was before, back and forth. And you could also speed it up if you wanted to. Right. Zoom is mono though, so you just have to try these out on your own to hear that panning. Thanks, Ryan. And by default, these oscillators will go from 0 to 1. But say you want to use them for like filter frequencies, then you can set the range so that it's more appropriate for the use case. All right, so we're going to just switch over to this bass, and we're going to use an effect, a cutoff, which is a high pass filter, and then change that to a slow 4. And wait, first of all, simplify. We're going to add a range function in front of this sine oscillator. So we're going to say go from 200 to 500 hertz with a sine wave operating at once per cycle. And you can hear that now. Right? Top of every 8 beats, the filter set to 200. You're getting the high frequency then. Set to 5,000 and back and forth. So then you can also slow that down if you wanted to to change the rate of that oscillator. It's a nice tail. All right, now we're getting into some music. Okay, so then you can swap those oscillators in pretty much anywhere that takes these numbers, and any parameter that's in, either an integer or floating point numbers or whatever, and just set the range appropriately and set the speed appropriately, and use them for those situations. And yeah, now we're going to. Oh, shit.
You good?
Are we there?
Yeah.
Are you guys there still? Oh, everything.
Did we
My
lose you for a
computer
second?
has frozen. Pardon me?
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Yeah, my screens are frozen and not coming back. I only hear you. I don't see it.
Oh man.
So technical difficulties. Sorry, everyone.
Well, I'm over here just like rocking out.
Nice.
So yeah, I didn't even notice for a second. I was like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, where did it
Nothing's
go?
changed. I was over here just
So-
making some super syncopated bass drops and stuff over here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think I'm going to recommend that everybody then takes a few minutes just doing some experimenting on their own while I restart my computer and rejoin the session. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
good.
It's not unfreezing yet. So hard reboot. Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll be here
Okay.
rocking out.
All right. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Everybody jamming? Nice. All right, get back to screen share. and open my notes again. Okay, ready to continue on. So we left off, we were just finished the oscillators, right, in the mini title. So we're going to move on to some other sorts, different sort of effects, which are called control patterns, which they sort of help arrange our patterns or sort of mess with some of these patterns in different ways. And so I'll show you what I mean right now. Back into mini title. And say we have a drum beat going. Right, and so that's fine. But maybe we're building up this pattern and we want to have it change like every few bars. Say like if you were playing drums, you wouldn't just play that. You'd add like a turnaround, right? Like every few bars, you might add a fill or something. So you can use this. You can use an every function, and then give it how many cycles. How often do you want this to happen? And say every 4, you want to play like a fast 2. So it'll play this pattern twice as fast, right? For 2 cycles. All right, so another good way to add some variation to our sounds. All right, and this is the same fast function that we were giving to the oscillators before, right? So you can use these things in different places. Like I can play it, can also be a slow. There's the slow. You can use rev, which plays it in reverse. There it is. Right, so it's just a nice way to add some variation by trying that out. Like you can replace every 4 with something like sometimes. So then that's more randomization where only once in a while it'll do the reverse, not necessarily every 4 cycles. Or you could do even a rarely. And so if you just want something to happen not so often, then that's a good easy way to do it. And yeah, so then with these things, you want to add them to the left of your sound pattern and then add a $sign at the end to say like apply this to everything on the right, really. All right, so normally you go from this to what we just had. You have to. Okay, and also basically if you add an effect, say cutoff, you can give it one parameter, and that's just going to apply that value across the whole cycle. But if you wanted to say have a cutoff at 1000 in the first half of the cycle, and then change it in the other half of the cycle, you just put those 2 numbers in a set of quotes, and that will split the cycle in 2 and play the 1000 in the first half and 1500 in the second half on top of those samples in that cycle. And we can be a little more obvious about this. Right? And same thing, like you can add more numbers to this. And so it's just going to apply a number to the corresponding sample, because we have 4 samples and 4 numbers in our cutoff function. And if you're wondering what happens if we add more numbers here, it'll only use the first 4. Like at this point, the pattern is coming from the samples in this first set of quotes. So the 500 and the 6,000 will just be ignored unless we added more samples to this set of quotes. Right, so now that final hi-hat is going to get a cutoff at 6,000 hertz. Okay, so that, and then same applies for any sort of effect and control pattern. The pattern by default comes from the items in the first list on the left. But if you wanted to say have the control pattern come from the right, you can do that as well, which would be like so. So now we flipped what's creating the pattern and what's working off of that pattern. So now we're just going to get two hits based on the 500 and the 6,000 on the right, and it's just going to be a bass drum and a hi-hat from the left. Right, so there are variations on this sort of thing here, combining the patterns in different ways. You can refer to the Tidal Cycles documentation if you want to get more deeply into that. And for now, we'll leave it there and just say that we'll put that back to the default by taking the pattern from the left. And so every live coder with Tidal Cycles needs to know this next one, basically, because it's just a really quick way to make things sound pretty cool. So I'm just playing this sample times 8. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to randomly select samples from the sample folder, right? So using this n function, if you just set it to a number like that, right, it's the same as doing this. All right, but sometimes you want to pattern that choice of samples, so you can use the n function, and I'm going to use this thing called irand8. irand8 just picks a random integer from 0 to 7 or 1 to 8. 0 to 7, I think. And so you're gonna hear some variation now. And oh, I want round brackets instead of quotes for that, because it's a function you're providing to it, to the end function. Right, so that's getting cool. But then we can do something called jux, which jux, it applies a function to a pattern, but only in the right-hand channel. So you see what I mean if I do something like jux rev, which is pretty famous. It'll play the pattern in reverse just on the right side. So you won't hear this on Zoom, but try it out yourself. And it's a nice way to just like fill out a pattern and add some more interest to it. And you can swap rev out for, say, a fast 4 or something really weird. Or a fast 2, really flutters. And maybe I'll note at this point that, once you get into this more, you'll want to keep adding effects, right? So if you had a lot of effects here listed in one line, it could get messy. So what people like to do is you can just split things up into different lines. So that still works as long as there's no space in between. That would, or even in Estuary you can have space in between. It'll execute the whole box.
Hey, Alex. Someone was asking,
Yeah.
what does the dollar sign mean?
So the dollar sign in this case is saying you're applying this control pattern, this jux function, to everything to the right of the dollar sign, like all of that, and versus the number sign here, that's going to apply this effect to the left, right, to the whatever's in that pattern. So there's lots of there's a subtle differences, I guess, that you have to sort of learn when to use what. You learn from experimenting with and you can read about. But yeah, so things like these control patterns that I'm talking about generally go on the left with a dollar sign, and you can string together different dollar sign moves. So like every 4, you do a fast 2, right? So it's the same thing. Is just going to grab everything to the right of this dollar sign and do it every 4, play it fast twice. So I don't have the chat open. Do that. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, and is the audio been off? Did I not check that box, or has it been sounding okay? From what
Sounds fine.
It sounds okay. So, okay, we're getting to the end of mini title at this point in good time. So I just want to show you a little bit more. Keep adding to this example a bit if you don't mind, or you could be absolutely crafting your own right now. But all right, so it's kind of sounding cool right now, but maybe when you want to add something to this drum sample. So say you're limited to working with your own box, so you could add another line of mini title in a different box. Yeah, Kyle's making some killer beats. But sometimes if you want to add another sound or another pattern to your own box, you would use something called stack. So stack, you would just add at the beginning, and then left square bracket, and then you want a comma to whatever line at the end of every line that you've used so far. And then if you want to add something else to what you're doing, you could start it fresh, right? Like this is, as if you have a blank box, and you can do something completely different. And say this, like the jux and this n IRAN function won't apply to whatever I'm starting with here. So you could just play a basic sample once per cycle. Right, so then from here you can start again and use something like note, which is just changes the pitch of the sample you're playing. And what I'm going to do is I could just change it to a specific pitch, and you hear that difference. But if I wanted to say like make a chord with it, then I use these square brackets with commas, and these, like I showed you before, like it'll play all of these samples at the same time on beat 1 of the bar. Close those brackets. And you can like play that twice if you want. Maybe you want to have a little more variation on that. You could use something called run, which will just play 8 different notes, like at this point chromatically. And you want to hear all of those, you could repeat RP times 8. Maybe add some randomization to that. And if you don't want it to be chromatic, you can use a scale function here and say use a minor scale. There are lots of scales you could use. And then, so now again, we're using a $sign to say apply this to what's on the right. And then it'll just stay contained inside of those round brackets.
Hey, Alex, I had a question.
Yep.
Is there a difference with using stack versus using multiple boxes in regards to like CPU processing or synchronization or anything like that?
My guess is that it would be fairly similar. Like you're playing the same amount out of the system. Like all the patterns are the same, but I don't think you'd save any processing if you're using stack saver or using a different box. Like.
Gotcha. So it's effectively the same thing.
Similar.
It's just the difference between being inside of one box versus being inside of multiple.
Yeah, exactly. You won't always, if you're playing with other people, you might not always get the chance to like just move into a different box, and it's kind of a nice way to keep things organized if you have the opportunity to. But if you really want to add another sound to what you're focusing on, stack is the way to go inside the same box.
Cool.
And Lee wants to know current link to the meaning of all these symbols. Yeah, so Lee, at the end of the slides, there's a list of resources, and there's a link to the Tidal Cycles documentation there if you want to read up more. So I think that's all I wanted to show you at this point in terms of mini title. So we're going to switch gears and look at Punctual and making visuals with Punctual. And then we'll come back to mini title at the end when we're doing our collaborating. So Punctual. All you need to do is just what I did there is select the language from this list. You can delete the code that's in the box, or you can move to it. You can move to another box and leave your mini title box if you like. And so we'll get going with this. Punctual is a programming language that actually does video and audio. It doesn't use the same sort of practice as Tidal Cycles with the repeating patterns, but it's more of a pure synthesis approach where you're adding waveforms together and splitting signals and yeah, it's definitely different, and there's not as much documentation and support for this language, but it's more of something you have to play with really to figure it out. I hate to say, there's some YouTube videos you can use for reference to follow, but yeah, so let's get going into some examples and you can get a taste of it. So starting with simplicity, we'll make a circle. And what I'm doing here is I'm giving the function name. The first parameter is really the coordinates. You can give it an XY coordinate, or you can just say 0 to signify the middle of the screen. And then the second coordinate is the radius of the circle. and we're going to send that out to the video output. Because Punctual is both audio and video, you can send your signals to different outputs, right, depending on what you're doing. So then that will make a circle in the middle. You can then, if you want to move it, say into the top left, you add some square brackets, and then you give it the X coordinate and your Y coordinate. And the screen is split between 1 and 0, 1 and -1. So in both dimensions. So if I want to move it to the top left corner, then I would go -0.5 in the X-axis and 0.5 in the Y-axis. So there it goes. So already, let's get into, just bring back the oscillators so that we have some movements going. In Punctual, you provide the oscillator's name. Sine is S-I-N, not S-I-N-E. They're all 3 letters, I believe. And in Punctual versus Tidal Cycles and Mini Tidal, the oscillators will go between -1 and 1, unless you add another function to it, just to match, because that's what the developer decided to go with, I guess. So there's an important difference to remember, I guess. And each oscillator takes a parameter of frequency in hertz. So say you want it to move, this will move this circle in the x-axis at a frequency of 0.3 hertz, or 0.3 times a second, and then we'll see some movement. And you can add another oscillator for the y-axis and have it float around like that. And even say you wanted to add a third oscillator to the radius of the circle, you could do this. You could do. You need round brackets for that. Right. You need round brackets because without it, the error comes from Punctual assuming that sine is the final parameter of circle, but then sine's missing its parameter. So just to keep that contained, you add the round bracket so that stays together as the radius. So now we're seeing the circle that gets really big and then disappears for a while. And that's because I mentioned that the oscillators go between -1 and 1. So once it passes 0, it disappears. Say we didn't want it to disappear and we want to limit that range, we would do it like this. We start with the minimum and then 2 tildes and then the maximum, 0.4, and then same thing, the dollar signs are back, and this is saying providing this range function to the sine oscillator, and telling the sine oscillator to only go between 0.1 and 0.4 at a rate of 0.1 hertz. So that will look like this. And we can slow this movement down to really see it. Speed that up. Okay, so that's how you kind of mix in oscillators for movements, like throughout with exchanging any parameters you'd like for them. Now I'm just going to quickly fly through a couple of other basic shapes that you can make with Punctual, and the same rules apply. Like if you want to swap out a parameter for an oscillator and using a range, you can do that as well. But I'm just going to do a few things. So you can make a point, make a single point, which isn't quite so interesting on its own, but when you apply some other functions and effects to points, like they can be really, really interesting. But then that just takes similarly a coordinate again by default. You move the points around. You can make a rectangle. Rectangle takes the coordinate as its first parameter, and then the width and the height, I guess, this way. Yeah, and I'll make it wider like that. And by the way, I also added a link to the end of the slides for the punctual reference, which looks like this. So it's pretty much, it's like, this is the documentation for punctual. It's just sort of a list of these functions and the parameters, explanation of the parameters that they take. So there's quite a few that you can try out, you know, with the ones we don't cover in this workshop today. But it's handy to just keep this open. And if you're wondering why some function isn't working, it's good to check the reference and say, oh, like I need to give that a different sort of parameter, or like there's some different syntax that needs to be used. Aspect ratio of the window, any way to make a perfect circle in a 1619 window? Good question, Ryan. I haven't experimented with that very much. A perfect circle. I don't think there's any shortcut that I'm aware of. Yeah, if you figure it out, let us know. But then we can go from rectangles to lines. Lines, there are a couple different options here. You can do a horizontal line. And that's going to be, see, now just going to check the reference. The first parameter is, yes, yeah, right, the y value, and then the width of the line. So we can have right in the middle of the screen, and then a width. And so even 0.3 is quite wide. We can have something like that, and then you can apply a sine oscillator and then have that move around if you want, with round brackets, of course. And as you can see, when I'm making these changes, after I evaluate, it'll quickly jump to the new expression. But a lot of times in a performance, you would probably want that to be a bit smoother, I guess, in the transition. So what you could do is this is how you do a crossfade, and then if you provide a number, that'll change in 4 seconds. It'll completely change. So make that obvious. We'll speed up this oscillator and see what happens. And then there'll be, so you see the old one fading away nicely, and the new one fades in. So that's, you pretty much like always want to have a crossfade set up early as you make your changes to your code. Images. Yeah, and well, actually, right before that, you can do a horizontal line or a vertical line like that. And say you could also do both, I guess, if you want to see that. or if you want to have both on screen at the same time, you would use a plus and add these patterns together. And so that's this sort of like stacking different lines in Tidal, right? Or you can divide these together and see what happens with that. Or you can multiply different functions together. And that's kind of more, yeah, where they would overlap versus, you know, divide. What did that do? Subtract, you can use similarly, and that would just probably, yeah, make a space where the second graph comes from. You make that more obvious with a negative 0.5. So that'll take a chunk out of the vertical line where that horizontal line intersects. Okay, now images. Images and variables as well. So we'll take that away. So you can use variables in Punctual to sort of keep things neat. Same thing with, you know, similar to Tidal Cycles, where you're separating, you know, into different lines, and then you can, you know, comment things out and add them back cleanly, neatly, rather than having to just remove them from a single line. So we're going to save this image in a variable called img, and the function for adding an image is text, and we're just going to copy and paste this image location in from the web. You can do this with images yourself. You just have to, you know, make sure that it's like the link to the specific image, right to the image, right? And then the second parameter to text is this fxy function, which is going to say apply the colors of this picture to all the pixels in the x and y axis. And then on the second line here, we're going to send that image out to the video output. And when you're using different lines, you need a semicolon at the end. So there we go. Now an image is loaded in right away. Like, it seems a bit bright to me. So what I would do is I could divide by 3, dial it back a bit. That's sort of nicer. You know, you want to strike a balance between having nice visuals and still being able to see the code. So that's a nice shortcut in terms of how to control it. And then at this point, you can start to get a little more creative, and you can add a circle on top of the image. And so then you'll just see that image inside of the circle. And we do that by, we're going to multiply the image with our circle. Right in the middle, the radius is 0.8. Okay, that's all right. Maybe we want to see a few more circles and have this kind of repeated in a pattern on the screen. So you can use this tile function, which takes the number of times to repeat this image in the x-axis, and then number of times to repeat it in the y-axis. And then the tile is a function. Switch to the reference. We have tile here. So we just added the x, how many times to repeat it in the x-axis, how many times to repeat it in the y-axis. The second parameter of tile is what to repeat, right? So the shortcut to that, like we've seen before, is adding that $sign. And so now the rest of this line, oops, the rest of this line up to the video, up to the output symbols, is what that third parameter is going to be. Like, you could either do it like that, right? Saying it's sort of a shortcut, but you could also just use the round brackets and it's the same thing. See? No change. Right, so that's what tile does. Then from here we can start to add some movement by spinning these images. We want to do that. So spin, same thing, just like the amount that you want to rotate everything to the right, and another $sign, like we did before. And now they've been rotated. Okay, cool. But let's add in some an oscillator now and have things kind of move around. So I'm just going to add an oscillator that goes from 0.4 to 0.6. And I'm going to use a saw wave at a rate of 0.4 hertz. And then away we go. Just a nice bit of movement. We can keep going with this pattern, with this example, and add, we can then apply a zoom effect. And starting with a static amount, let's do that. 3. And you can see that it just over and over again, I'm adding an effect and then using that $sign to apply it to what's already there. First of all, that. All right, so by using a number less than 1, I'm zooming out. And if I was to use 1.3, I'd be zooming in. If I want to zoom in and out with some motion, I'll add another oscillator. And now we're starting to see something you could actually use in a performance, in a presentation. Like that's that's not a ton of code to pull together. I think once you get the basics of it. And then for one more thing, I'm going to use this move function, which will slide it around on the you can slide it around the X and Y axes. So static value first. All right, so yeah, again, having that crossfade is always nice because it's just a smooth transition versus that chunky, from one to the other. And we'll do one more oscillator to sort of have things moving nicely. So there you go. We're zooming, we're rotating, we've tiled, and we're also moving. This, these circles that are focusing on a part of an image that we've loaded in. What's missing at this point, I think, would be a bit of audio reactivity. And so, say there's a beat playing in with mini Tidal. I'll load back in something from before. All right, so there are functions in Punctual. These here, high, mid, low, analyze how much power is coming from the output, and then their sibling functions are for the inputs that you can use. And so we can use these values anywhere there are numbers in our Punctual code. Like say we can affect the brightness of what we're seeing by the low frequencies. So if we're not getting a lot of low frequencies. There we go. So now we're seeing the results of using that image and then subtracting what's coming in, what's going out, sorry, in the high frequency range. And you could switch that over to the low frequencies if you want to do something different. Or mid, right, mid. Or say you could even do this with the radius of the circle. Use the low frequencies for that. And then say I took that away. It all disappears when the sound stops, because there are no more low frequencies going out. And so yeah, that's what I wanted to show you with Punctual visuals today, at least an intro. And there's pretty much an infinite amount of possibilities that you can combine these functions and shapes and really go nuts with it. Really, like you can't document all the ways that you can use this. It really just takes an exploration on your own time and yeah, figuring out how to stack these things together. But this is just one quite specific example of what you could do, I guess, in a performance setting. And so, yeah, any questions now? Take a minute if you have any.
I'm pretty blown away by how much things change with just a small amount of code, how complicated things can be generated. I mean, I'm over here jamming with stuff, and I mean, like the amount of variety that I can come up with it's amazing with like very small, like just like 3 or 4 lines of code. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you can stack. There are even more functions where you can play with the colors and have those modified, and you can add different images. Maybe I'm not sure about that, but you can, like, there are different ways to like add different graphs. It's all graph theory, right? It's what this is based on, as you can tell from the reference, and different ways to add and subtract, and you fit those frequency analyzers in wherever you like, and you really have a lot of motion happening. And so it is performance. You quickly get to something that's good for a performance, I think, and at least something to jump off of, right? If you have sort of come up with a plan in place of like how you might structure something. But yeah, but if there aren't any more questions, then we'll jump into. Oh, here's one. So the Punctual code knows how to change and interact with the mini Tidal code because of these low, mid, and high functions that I threw in, because they're keeping track. They're analyzing what's going out of Estuary, right? So any sound that we're creating with our code is going through the output of this application, and those functions are just watching that output. And if you're using low, then you're just looking at the low frequencies. And similarly, if you can have audio input and use that to contribute to the value. So I think if I use ILO here, and then as I'm talking, it's analyzing the audio input that way. So recently the orchestra did a performance with a saxophone player, and we were all on Zoom, and he was in St. John's, or the audio from Zoom was being provided to Punctual, and then we were applying effects and basing our visuals off of his audio input. So you can go either way. Anyway, just long story short. And then also we were using Punctual audio to sort of add audio effects to the saxophone player, which I'll get into for a bit now, just before we start trying to make a jam happen. So
Alex,
you can just.
I had a question for you.
Sure.
Just like that, where it can analyze audio coming in, does Tidal Cycles or Mini Tidal, does it have an audio input function as well? Or is it all sample based?
It's all sample based. Yeah, I don't believe that there would be a place for audio input in Tidal Cycles.
And then another question that I had also was with those samples. I think I saw in the Tidal Cycles documentation, they've got all the effects on there. Is there like an overdrive or distortion go-to effect that you like?
Yeah, there are a couple. Shape and Crush are a couple of nice ones, and I think Shape I often default to, and I think because of some bad occasions in Punctual, there was a feature made to turn those off by default because of some naughty behavior, and they can be quite loud and noisy. So that there was a safe mode created that's on by default. So if you want to use the bit crushing in Estuary, you have to turn unsafe mode on. And it applies to things like gain as well. As in Tidal, there's an overgain. Like the regular gain effect won't go past 2 or something. But so to save people's ears, but there's an overgain effect that pro coders had to have for when they want to use it. So the same thing with bit crushing and volume. The unsafe mode sort of lets you go wild.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for showing that, because I'm definitely going straight to unsafe mode.
Yeah. I think a lot of people will.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get into a bit of Punctual. I know Punctual is a lot to take on right off the bat just by watching examples, but I'm just going to show you a bit about audio, and then we can all start to collaborate, which is a lot of fun. So back to this. Now, like before, we're going to use another sine wave, but now we're going to start using frequencies that are more appropriate for audio. Say sine 440, and we're going to send that out to audio output. So, very classic example, a sine wave. That's in frequency in hertz. You could also, if you don't want to use hertz, you can use MIDI notes like this. And And so now we're playing MIDI note 60, and that MIDI CPS is converting the MIDI note to cycles per second. And same thing as before, crossfades are very nice to use. And then we'll go straight into filters and switch this to a saw wave. And then we can add a low pass filter. So that's a bit loud. Low pass filter takes the signal, the signal, and then the frequency the filter is going to be at, and then the Q setting. So there you go. Low pass filter set to 1000 hertz. There's also high pass filter. And a band pass filter. And just as before, you can make things more fun by using a range. Have this move around. Low. And a good thing to keep in mind when you're using punctual audio is volume control. A lot of the time you might want to, especially if you're collaborating, you might want to start with something a bit lower, I guess, and then turn it up if you want to turn it up. So to do that, use everything that you've already had, multiply by a negative number in round brackets. You need round brackets for negative numbers, and then dB is for volume, like that. So you hear that go quiet. That's just a good one to have on by default. You can even just set that to 1 and have it there ready to change if you want to. You can also add delay as an effect, which is fun. Delay takes 2 parameters. The first one is like the max delay time, and then you can provide it with a list of the delay times that you want to use. And like that. Maybe you want to hear that a bit more with the square wave. And now if we want to add more than one note to this, say, we're only playing MIDI note 60 here, but punctual by default, if you want to split that, if you want to add another line, you use some square brackets, and you can provide another number like that, and you'll hear the 2 different frequencies. And then now, just a final note, it's already getting a bit cluttered, I would say. So if you wanted to, same thing again as before, I think it's important to know how to separate things into different lines and keep it organized, and just it's a lot easier to read and keep track of what you're doing that way. So I'm going to separate this into a few different variables. you first of all keep your wave, your oscillator in 1. And now, since we're using different lines, we want to use semicolons at the end, and we'll save that square wave going through the low pass filter into S. And then we're going to apply the delay to S, right? We're passing that variable down and saving that into another variable we'll call D. And then finally, we get rid of this. And we will play D out through the audio output. And so we shouldn't hear a change, right? But if then we change this back to a saw wave, it'll still work. And there you go. I think punctual audio it can add a nice layer. Can add a nice layer to a piece where you just want that sort of a pad playing throughout. And kind of helps connect other things. And again, it's to experiment to infinity, and you can try out like more pure synthesis ideas and patterns this way. Compared to, say, tidal cycles, which is a very different sort of paradigm. And yeah, so that's punctual, the 2 different sides of punctual. Any questions on the audio?
How different is this code from Tidal?
How different is this code from Tidal? Quite different. Yeah, you can see that there are some syntax differences that are very obvious. Like Tidal, you can save variables in longer form pieces. You can save sections and patterns into variables, which I didn't get into today, but it's possible. But there are a lot of similarities as well, because they're both based on another programming language called Haskell, which is a functional programming language. And so they do share some things in common, but the paradigms that are used in the 2 are quite different. And yeah, I think we'll discover that pretty quickly when we start jamming that, because you have to switch brains if you're going between the 2 of them, even though there's some ways to connect it all together. But all right, so then if that's cool, we can get to some jamming, I think, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions when we get into that, and we can either we're going to do a roulette, so it's not like we'll all be playing at the same time, focused in our own boxes, but we'll be able to take turns making changes and then watching other people make changes, and it's sort of a nicer way to collaborate at the beginning, especially when people are new. So I'm going to get that set up. And if anybody needs a break, 5 minutes, like go ahead. It's I can hold off for a few.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's take a stretch for a second and come back.
Sure. Okay.
I personally discovered the bit crushing method, and now
there you go.
Now I'm
all right.
I'm stuck. I can't.
Maybe
I
people
can't
want a
stop.
bit crush for a few minutes.
Yes.
But okay, we'll yeah, a couple minutes after, like 5 minutes, and then I'll show you. I'm going to leave it here, and I'll show you how to create a collaborative session in Estuary.
Perfect.
Because that should be a part of this tutorial, this workshop as well.
Hey, Alex.
Hey.
Hey, how many how many different kick drum samples are there in Tidal Cycles, for example?
There are lots, like, because there's BD, and then there's another sample group called drum, and others like, in the basic Tidal Cycles pack, there are a good number, and then in Estuary, we added a few more collections. So it really is, especially when you do like a local installation, you can add as many as you like, right? You can add any sample packs that you have access to Tidal Cycles when it's installed on your system.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going through and I'm just like noticing that the number keeps going up and up and up and up and up. It seems like a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody needs a lot of kick drums.
Yes, that's important.
Al, you've hit peak happiness on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Done really well, Alex. Like, even I'm following it. I'm not the most avid coder, and it's giving me a lot of inspiration to just use the references you gave us. Sorry, my camera's off. Give the references you gave us to like really dive in and do more of that.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Because yeah, it's stuff gets complicated quickly. So I hope I aimed at the right difficulty level, I guess, for an introduction to this.
I think so. And really quick, I think you're not sharing computer sound, and we're getting audio through your microphone.
Right. Okay.
I wanted to check that really quick. I didn't want to interrupt you in the middle of your
yeah
session. That throws me off.
Thanks. After I rebooted, I forgot to hit that checkbox.
It happens, man. I do it like 8 times a day, and I forget 7 out of those 8.
Yeah. I should just have it. There should be a default setting, definitely. Okay, then I'm gonna start sharing again. We're about ready to go.
So if we want to download these dirt samples, we need to sign up for an account.
No, the dirt samples. Do we find the list of them? I know they're on GitHub somewhere.
I think you put it in the chat.
I don't think I put I found the super dirt samples repository today. There we are. This is it. This is like the default list of samples available in Tidal Cycles, and I believe that these are all in Estuary at this point. So I'll put this in the chat. Chat. Hey, thanks for coming, Alex. Okay, so there we go. That's the list of default Tidal Cycle samples.
It's a lot.
And then, yeah, there's a lot. All right, yeah, no problem, Raymond. Thanks for coming. And in Estuary, I'll show you the Estuary samples as well, because that's useful to know. We're using this today. This repository is also what's been added to the Cybernetic Orchestra, and even there are a few other ones actually, but here are a list of some more sounds that you can try out. And not PyCharm. I'm just joining this ensemble to create the roulette view now. I'll show you how to create an ensemble from the beginning in a second. Oops. Because there's no shortcut to do it this way. All right, we ready to continue on our merry way?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get to it then. So yeah, just from Estuary, I'll show everybody how to, say you were creating an ensemble for yourselves for a jam sometime. You go to the ensemble button from the homepage, and you can create a new ensemble. And a lot of text here to explain what the different fields are for. First of all, you give it a name, and the host password is like is the root password, I guess, and this is what you would use to say delete it, I guess. And then the participant password is what you give out to people that are going to collaborate with you, and they enter it in when they join the ensemble. And then there's an expiry time. So rather than signing up for accounts or anything, what Estuary does is leave the default expiry time to 1 hour. So what it'll do is if after an hour this your ensemble hasn't been used, then it'll just clear it from the list. You can change that expiry time to different settings. To do so, though, to make it greater than an hour, you need a community password, which I think is, not that hard to get either. It's asking in the Estuary community for that. But we don't need, I already created an ensemble, so I'll just join again and show you how to join. We can all now jump into the dadageek workshop ensemble. And all you need to do is enter a username and then optionally a location. And the password is just dadageek. And so everybody can join now. I'm just going to close this tab because I don't need to be in there twice. And then I'll see this list populate as people join. And let me know if you have any issues with that.
You said dadageek was the password?
Yeah. You all see the same view that you're seeing from my screen share, right? Like those 3 columns. Yeah, you're good. Awesome.
I don't see those 3 columns. I see like it looked in the regular solo mode.
Oh.
6 boxes.
Tim, you see just the 3 columns? I got a thumbs up from you.
Now there's a 4th one with the one you just opened. Back to 3.
Sorry, with the what, Alberto?
Oh, saying yeah, we can see 3. You just opened a 4th one and closed it, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the reference here.
Mine looks like solo mode, but I have Eric is there, automatic pilot.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Okay. Okay. Then I think what we all might need to do is if you enter in preset view in the terminal and then roulette 3, that should update your view. I have to confirm what the proper way to publish the view for everybody is. and then with an exclamation mark at the beginning of, and yeah, you look on the screen share, it's preset view all one word, and then roulette 3. I'll leave that up for a minute. Or I'll type it in the chat as well. And so you should, on your own browser, you should see what's in my screen share. That works, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that did it.
It's important to all have this roulette view for this next bit.
Not seeing that actually.
Did you use the exclamation mark at the front of that command and
No, I did
roulette
not.
3? Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I see there are some chat messages. Everybody's saying preset roulette 3.
Okay. Yes, awesome.
There we go. Thanks. Okay, so I think we're getting close to all set up. We've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Only see 7 people in this ensemble so far. So we're actually missing quite a few. People are still following. Okay, some people might just want to watch. Oh, that's fine. We'll get going on this then. I'm just going to say a few words about this Estuary interface we're looking at now. So you've all found the terminal in the chat down at the bottom. Terminal commands are used with exclamation mark at the front of them. But if you don't use exclamation mark, then it's just the chat. You can actually communicate through it. And so a lot of times, like, if people aren't necessarily connected by video conferencing, then that's the primary way to talk to your collaborators, I guess. You can also, so people that join without entering an ensemble password, like you won't be able to make any changes to the code. I see there are a couple of anonymous participants. So just if you're wondering why, that's why. And down the bottom right, if you hover over someone, you see some information about their system. And if you click, then this is an important screen, like when collaborating, because here you're seeing the latency, the load, and the FPS of each person's system. And since what you experience is so reliant on your own system, to be a good collaborator in Estuary in this environment, you should keep an eye on the load of everyone's system, because say you add in a complicated set of effects and control patterns that might be a lot for someone's processor, someone's computer, that you'll see the load spike, and that'll just bring down what their experience is and not be very fun for them. So especially when you have a lot of people working in their own box, that's important. For roulette, it should be easier to keep that load low for everybody. But that's just, it's always I always leave that open to see what's going on. And that's not important, but so we have the load to watch and the latency. Otherwise, we can close. You can either keep the reference open if you want to do that or not. So you can copy and paste things from here into there if you want to try them out. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll have mini title on the left, and then 2 boxes for punctual, and set these up. And we'll say that this is for visuals, and this is for audio. And mini title is just mini title. So in roulette mode, this is a nice way to work, because you can just kind of line up and you press this plus at the top, and then it's like, I'm next, I guess, right? So I go and I make some code. I send that to video output. And there we go. Okay, I did something. I click on my name and I'm gone from the front of the line. And then, you know, there would be someone behind me and it would now be their turn. And then once you're done, you can jump into another line and make a change somewhere else. Okay, so I just created a couple of basic samples that we can jump off of, and guys feel free to get in line and try making some changes. Like we can go as slow as you like. Like if you're at the front of the line, you don't know what to do, just ask what's going on, and we can all just learn from seeing others make some changes. And it can be as small as just changing a number or an oscillator type. It doesn't have to be a big change at all. Like the smaller the change, the better at this point. So go on ahead. But then always just remember, it's great to have your name at the top, and to know when it's your turn to make the change. If you want to hear things like crush, then you got to turn on safe mode on. There we go. Come on, guys, the water's warm. Come on in, try it out. See the log. So, Lee, like, have you try logging in and putting the password in? Like, what do you mean? In the dadageek session, you click the session name first, and then there's the login screen. And then
Yeah, I'm actually my screen is blinking red like yours, and I can hear it. It's just that it won't. I'm logged in as Lee, but I'm stuck on the screen.
Logged in as Lee, but stuck on the screen.
So I can see my name down there as you're scrolling through.
Okay.
But I can't access that account.
Okay, so maybe, so this sometimes happens, like if you try logging in again and just use Lee2 or something and enter in the password,
Okay.
and yeah, you might be able to contribute after that. I can't see any of the codes. Oh, Paula, did you change your preset view? Incorrect ensemble, but it's just you went to Alberto. You went to the dadageek ensemble, and then the password is just dadageek.
Oh, my mistake. I thought it was that other thing that you pasted in there.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Yeah, that was the name of the ensemble. So, Paula, I'll paste the commands you want to use in the Zoom chat so that you can change your view to the one that we're all looking at. So just copy and paste that into the terminal. Okay, that worked?
Okay.
In the punctual audio, yeah, you just needed to add a crossfade, or you can get rid of the crossfade. So in that punctual audio, I'm just going to add a low pass filter to what's there. Capturing that whole saw wave with some round brackets, and then adding the filter frequency and the cue, right? So then that'll then dial it back. If you added that bass drum at the first line, we'd want to add that into the stack list by copying and pasting, cutting that, and then moving it below stack. Yeah, you got it. And then you're missing a second quote after BD times 8. You're just missing the closing quote in that third line. That's why it was a syntax issue. There you go. Done making your changes, you just click on your name to clear yourself from the front of that queue. Signal that you're done. There you go. Visuals here. If you wanted to add that horizontal line, you could save that in a variable, and with a semicolon there, and you could then just add that to what's already playing out. And then, yeah. Something maybe I didn't mention is similar to how audio signals can be split. By using square brackets to hear multiple notes. You can split a visual signal as well. Just by somewhere where you're writing one number, you can add a list of numbers, and then you can see then it'll split it into like red, green, and blue. So add another, and then if I add another number, and it'll go back to another red line, another white line, and then finally another red line, I believe. Yeah, so anyway, you can add any number of numbers, and it'll split the signal that many ways. Is there a 909? You can jump over to samples list. Yeah, there is a 909. Ike, I think you just need a $sign after, right before that BPF. Say you're gonna apply that delay to the rest of that signal. And then, yeah, shift enter to evaluate that. You should see a flash when it tries. See what went wrong. We're just sure you're not far off with this punctual audio. Adding delay, bandpass filter. You don't need the saw here. Having that providing 54 to 76 saw oscillator is enough, and then that's going to be a frequency for the filter and the cue. Also, you want a semicolon at the end of the line. And then you also need to provide an oscillator before that MIDI CPS function. And then that might be guys, thanks so much for coming. Got something out of it. So good thing to remember when you're collaborating, I guess, is like ideally don't leave syntax issues behind. Is a good approach to have. And you can always undo what you've done, put it back to like working code in these roulette forms. So what is
Hey, thanks, Alex and everybody. I'm gonna dip.
Okay, absolutely. Thanks for coming. And yeah, so this is Estuary will be around, and you guys can always go back and make a new ensemble anytime you want, and collaborate online. There's a Discord channel, Discord server that I put a link to in the slides, and you can sort of there are jams that are arranged on there. You can always hop in on it. They're open to everybody. Good place to learn. And we did the roulette today to learn and get the basics of it. But I think in those they more go for the approach where you're in your own square, which we could switch to if people want to try that out. And you fixed it. Nice. That looks great. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if people are welcome to keep jamming, or if you have to head off, feel free. Yeah, that's awesome, Lee. Glad to hear it. Happy to. Yeah, glad you liked it, Alberto. Yeah, that's a pretty special part of this, I think, is because we're not like playing instruments, and relying on that real-time feedback. It's sort of like you're setting the commands to then all be time aligned by our computers, and then it doesn't matter if we're not hearing exactly those few milliseconds in the same zones. It's great for that. Fireside, you guys had a good time. Thanks for dropping in. live coding performance isn't over until all the code is gone. And then we can just clear this out and then evaluate until it all fades away. Which sometimes there's a tail on things because of the way they've been set. Even after you've evaluated an empty box. Those crossfades and everything. That should eventually just let rest. Is everybody still hearing you? Continue on. And if it never stops, that's when you reload. So there you go. That was a good jam. It was fun. Anybody have any last minute questions? I guess we're gonna wrap it up here and move on with our days.
So for a follow-up, what is your first recommendation?
First recommendation in terms of like
A follow-up
learning
for
and
this,
continuing
for
with it?
studying this type of language and this platform.
Yeah, you can. Well, I'd say it's great to continue with Estuary because of the accessibility of it. I think if you wanted to really get into, if you like Tidal Cycles and you wanted to get more into that, you could move forward by trying to get it installed on your own system and having a local setup, and then you can load in different samples, your own sample sets, and have more options there. And then also in the links that I put in the resources on the resources slide, there's a Tidal Cycles course you can take in the reference, and you can then go further with that, and then that will help improve your skills that you can bring back to these collaboration sessions on Estuary once you've kind of dove in with it in other ways. And similar with Punctual, there's a standalone Punctual web application without all the fancy features of Estuary, and you can just focus in on that there. And yeah, like there's so many ways to go about this, but I think then joining the Estuary Discord server and getting together with people online and then continuing to collaborate is also an awesome thing to be doing. So yeah, no problem. For sure, yeah.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. It's very addictive.
Yeah. We have some follow-up jam sessions in the weeks to come if people want.
Yeah,
Meet
that
up
sounds
on
like a good idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to be posting the video for this up online so that people can go back and review it and stuff like that if there's anything that we missed. And also I can make sure I can follow up with everyone and send out a link via Eventbrite that signed up, and so everyone can get that link. So I can do it. I can send it out that way.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, man. I hope that we're going to do some more live coding stuff at dadageek for sure.
Absolutely. Happy to hear that. Glad everybody had a good time. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to kind of share that, and I hope we created some new interest for this sort of thing.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex.
Okay, great. Good to
All
meet
right.
you all and jam. Talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for coming.
Okay. All right. Bye.